My name is Howard Hawk. That's H-A-W-K. And
What is your birthday?
I was born October of 1948,
October what?
October 28. Same date as Bill Gates, by the way.
What year?
1948.
48. So how old are you now? You are 50.
I'm 71. I'll be 72 in October.
72?
Yes.
You look like a 52.
It was probably that clean living that I've subscribed to.
Your face is cheating. Where were you born?
In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Oh. So tell me about your family background when you were growing up, your parents and your siblings.
Well, my father was a World War II vet. He was a Navy veteran who participated heavily in the D-Day invasion in France. He obviously was a member of the American Legion and a very prominent veterans organization. And consequently, we have always regaled the experience of being a veteran in my household growing up. So in 1968, I had my 20th birthday. I was wasting my time and money in college.
Come on.
No, I have a follow-up to that tale. But it was my 20th birthday, and I'd worked all summer, and I said, you know, I'm not going to go back. We had a draft, military draft in 1968. I said, eventually, you know, I'm still technically a student at this point, but I had my 20th birthday, and I said, I'm going to enlist in the Army. This was kind of at the height of the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
And I fully expected to be on the ground in Vietnam in a few months. And in early 1969, I was still in training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, in the artillery. And North Korea shot a Navy, they referred to it as a spy plane.
Pueblo.
No, that was in 67. That was a ship. And
EC-121, yes.
yeah, that's right. And I was at Fort Sill with something called alert orders for Vietnam, which wasn't a shock. They told us everybody over the age of 18, 19 and above, you're going to Nam at Fort Sill. So all of a sudden, I'm a week away from leaving for Vietnam. I had orders changed to Korea. I knew nothing about Korea.
Come on, you are not Korean War veteran generation, and you still didn't know anything about Korea?
No, well, my dad was in World War II. No, I knew where Korea was on the map. I knew there was a war, and I knew it was North and South. They called it a police action. And, you know, I'm giving you my history lesson. But until the Pueblo was captured, nobody thought much about, you know, we had troops there and blah, blah. So all of a sudden, I'm headed for Korea. Now, my senior NCOs at Fort Sill, most of them had served in the Korean War. A lot of them had served in the Korean War. And they said it was really not a very good place to be fighting a war. I mean, and some of them were Vietnam veterans as well. So I didn't know what to expect. We knew it got really cold there because we'd seen the pictures of the Korean War. And so in, I guess, early May of 1969, I was shipped off from Fort Lewis, Washington to Seoul, South Korea.
Yeah.
And that's where my Korean story begins, I guess.
So tell me about this. Many of Korean War veterans didn't know anything about Korea. Nobody taught them while they were in school. But you are the Korea defense veteran, which are the second generation of Korean War veterans. So you born in 48. School and teachers might have taught you about the Korean War. Did they talk about the Korean War much when you were in school?
I don't believe so. You know, you have to remember the parents of my generation of children were World War II vets. So it was all about World War II and how we beat the Germans and the Japs. And that's how we grew up. All the TV shows. There was a Navy show on when I was a kid called Victory at Sea. It was all about the naval battles of World War II. There was another show on called Combat. It was again fighting the Germans in Europe in World War II. Yeah, the Korean War got shuffled to the bottom of the deck, so to speak. So,
So when did you graduate high school?
1966.
1966, where? In Philadelphia?
No, in Doylestown, Pennsylvania.
Could you spell it? Doylestown?
Doylestown.
And that's a Doylestown High School. What is the name
Central
of it?
Bucks High School.
Central Bucks?
Bucks, Bucks. It's now 3 high schools,
Got it.
but it was 1 when I was there.
So from Fort Lewis, how did you go to Korea?
Northwest Orient Airlines, direct to Seoul.
Wow.
From SeaTac Airport in Washington, that's Seattle-Tacoma, to Kimpo in South Korea.
Uh-huh. So you were in the Army, right?
Correct.
What unit was it?
Artillery. My unit in Korea was the 6th and the 12th Artillery, 6th Battalion, 12th Artillery, and we were stationed at Camp St. Barbara.
6th Battalion and Regiment?
12th Artillery. It was
Yeah.
6 and 12.
6 and 12 artillery.
I Corps Artillery was the over.
The division, 2nd Division?
No, it was. I Corps had their own units.
I see.
There was the 2nd Division, the 7th Division, and I Corps.
Okay.
And I was in I Corps Artillery.
What was your rank at the time?
Private E2 when I got to Korea.
What is your specialty?
Fire direction.
Fire direction. What is that? What does that mean?
We, by radio or by landline, tell the fellas on the guns it's called deflection and quadrant. Keep in mind, it's 50 years ago.
Yeah.
We're to point the guns laterally and vertically.
Coordinate.
Correct. That's deflection and quadrant.
Yes.
And when they do that, when they say we're ready, and then we give the order to shoot. That's fire direction. So I was with battalion headquarters, and I was a fire direction specialist.
Ah. Tell me, when did you arrive in Gimpo Airport? That should be around May still.
Early May of 1969.
Yeah. So tell me exactly the first image of Korea. I mean, be honest, okay? In 69, still, Korea was on the rapid development process, but it was the early phase of it. Tell me, what is the image of Korea you still remember? Be honest.
Okay, you mean I'm not going to offend you? As we walked off the plane that landed, the first sign we saw was no spitting on the runway. Seriously. And we went, well, I wasn't really going to spit on the runway, but, apparently that's a problem.
Why was the problem?
I don't know.
Spit
But
on the runway, it's going to be evaporated right away, right?
Yeah.
Maybe during the winter.
Well, you'll have to ask the people that put it on put the sign up, I guess.
Okay, and go on.
So anyhow, it was sunny. And for the next 3 days, that was the last time I saw the sunshine. It rained for the next 3 days.
Yeah.
We were at a ship to a transient center, so you adjust to the time change because there's a 13-hour difference between where I had just left and Korea. And like I said, it rained. And that was about it. We were in the Army. Training is like they reduce you to being a nobody. So it wasn't like, oh, gee, I'm in a foreign country. I'm going to make the most of my experience here. Eventually, that occurred to me. I'm a pretty smart guy. I was in college between high school and joining the Army, but when I first got there, yeah, I'm like,
Nobody.
no, yeah, I'm just going along like the herd animal, And after 2 or 3 days, we loaded up all of our gear. It was called TA-50.
Mm-hmm.
We had a duffel bag full of things, Korean things, like long underwear and heavy boots and whatever. And then we got in the back of a big truck with a canvas top called a deuce and a half, and they shuffled us off to we didn't know where, and I ended up in Camp St. Barbara.
Camp
Camp
St. Barbara.
St. Barbara.
Where was it?
Well, you leave Kimpo. It's at the end of what was called the MSR, the military supply route.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah.
that. You go from there to Uijeongbu,
Yeah.
and from there to Tongdashan, and then you keep on going. And when the macadam ends, you're at Camp St. Barbara.
So it's a far north.
Right. I
Yeah.
think we were about as far east as any American military unit.
Far east?
East. Yeah.
So what did you do there?
Well, we walked into the orderly room, and the first sergeant greeted us. There was 4 of us that got sent to that unit, and I recall these are the only words I really recall. He said, because he was wearing his helmet and a sidearm, and he said, "Well, welcome to Korea," and he was talking about the North Koreans were massed on the border. They expected an invasion to be imminent. And he said, remember when the shooting starts, this is a quote, when the shooting starts, save the last round for yourself. Because the last thing you want to be on this earth is a POW of the North Koreans. And I went, uh-oh. And we looked around, he says, can we go to Vietnam? But the shooting never really started. Not in my world there anyway. So anyway.
It was almost like threatening you guys to be disciplined.
Well, I think he was serious. He was a Korean War veteran, and I can picture the guy, but I can't remember his name. Because I had 2 first sergeants during my tour of duty in Korea. And the first guy was, they were both Korean War veterans. Well, I don't want to go down the road of the first sergeant. The guy I'm talking about was not a nice guy, let me put it that way. So anyway, yeah, so, and he wasn't entirely wrong. I mean, given the history of North Korea,
But as you mentioned, the USS Pueblo was abducted by the North Koreans in 1968.
Correct.
And then EC-121 was shot down by the North Koreans in 69.
Correct.
And then early January in 69, North Korean guerrillas attacked the Blue House, which is White House. So that was one of the most heightened times after the Korean War. So tell me about more that how you sensed the situation there when you were there.
Well, I have other Korean War veteran friends that were there a year or two, well, 2 or 3 years earlier, and they were like, they were on foreign soil. One friend of mine from Cody said, we didn't have any live ammunition. Well, if we left the compound where I was, we always had live ammunition.
Oh.
You were required to have a gun.
Out of the compound?
Yeah, the barbed wire, the compound where we were.
Uh-huh.
Camp St. Barbara, I think, had 5 compounds. And I don't, other than the headquarters and headquarters battery of the 6th and the 12th, that was my compound. There was another compound where we had guns that were related to us, the 6th and the 12th, Charlie battery, that were in place and ready to shoot. That was another compound. There was another one called, I think, the 2nd and 76th. And I'm not sure what they had. And I'm not sure, there are no more nuclear weapons in South Korea. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. There were nuclear weapons at Camp St. Barbara.
At the time.
Artillery weapons.
Yes.
They were not fired in my guns, in my unit, but that unit was nuclear capable.
Yeah.
So that's where Camp St. Barbara. So it was obviously heavily, very secure.
So
But
did you sense that really heightened, and were there any incidents between North Korean soldiers and yours?
Yes. People I know that had like commo details, communications. They were laying communication. If they were up on the north or near the DMZ, they drew fire. You know, I don't recollect anybody that I know of getting hit, but there were rounds fired from North Korea at.
Actually happened.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember the city where the Camp St. Barbara was located?
Well, it was a village, and we called it Pekwiri. Pekwiri. I'm not.
Okay.
You'll have to forgive me on that one.
Yeah. But while you were there in Korea, were you able to travel around Korea?
A little bit.
Tell me about where you go and what did you see? Exactly detail, please.
Okay. Well, at a certain point, I was E4, specialist 4th class. Then I could get overnight passes. Mm-hmm. And I had a couple of overnight passes to, well, here's one. It was called training. I think it's called TDY. Mm-hmm. I was TDY to Seoul for they were teaching a audio-visual class where you learned how to run projectors, mm-hmm. film projectors. That was an excuse for an overnight pass. I think I spent 3 days, 2 nights in Seoul.
Yeah.
In the Itaewon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And a friend of mine who was also in the same detail, and I hit some of the Korean bars in Itaewon.
Yeah.
And
how was the economy at the time in Korea?
well, I got the sense everybody was still on a wartime footing. This was, 83, 16, 17 years after the armistice. Mm-hmm. And everybody north of Seoul was on a wartime footing. Mm-hmm. I never really got south of Seoul, so I have no idea.
Yeah.
You know, I know there's like parks down there and things, or there were back then. People I knew in the village had radios, and if you were fiddling with the radio, they referred to it as Joe Chink radio. Mm-hmm. And they said, oh, you know what? If you get caught listening to North Korean radio, you know, they'll take you to jail.
I see.
We'll take them to jail, obviously. I wouldn't have gone to jail. I couldn't understand the language anyway. So. Mm-hmm. But I did learn a little bit of it. I mean, you know, I could... the GI barber was not really all that amenable to me, so I'd go to the village to get my hair cut.
Uh-huh.
And one of the few things in Korean I remember was Mori Kaka Chushipsho.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So...
Please have my haircut.
Okay.
That's good.
I still 50 years later, I still remember that.
How did you see Korean people at the time? Were they poor or?
Yes. Now, we had houseboys.
Yeah, tell me about it.
And we had a houseboy. He referred to himself as Johnny. He owned 2 hotels in Seoul, but he was a houseboy. So he was making enough as a houseboy, and we'd tip him to take our laundry around, you know. He was making enough as a houseboy at Camp St. Barbara, okay,
Yeah.
shining boots,
Yeah.
that he owned 2 hotels in Seoul.
Really?
Now, yes. Well, according to him, anyway. I'd never stayed at the
No,
hotels.
no, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, anyway,
How old was he?
40s, 40-something maybe?
40-year-old Korean man shined the shoe
Yes.
for the American.
Houseboy was not, you know, we didn't refer to him as boy. We took care of him. He took care of us, you know. We had starched pant legs, boots all shined, and he was great. So at the end of the month when we got paid, you know, we throw a bit of money at our houseboy.
Maybe that's true that he owned the 2, you know, but still he's working. And I think he is connecting the American soldiers to his own hotel.
And I'll tell you something, and this is no reflection on him because I have no idea, but there was a huge black market for things.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? I mean,
American PX.
as I've described where my unit was, we were at the very end of the line. Even at Camp St. Barbara, we were at the very end of all the compounds. And we had shortages of things because they disappeared at a rail yard. We had, in the middle of winter, and you can imagine what the winter was like up there in the hills in
Baekguri.
Baekguri, yeah. Somebody had stolen a whole rail car of diesel
Wow.
that we used for heating. So we had no heat for like a week and a half or something, if I remember. Yeah, we were all walking around, sleeping in our long johns, and because we had a Quonset hut, you know.
You're not kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. So there was a big investigation about that, and they were talking. CID called a lot of us in and interviewed because people like me that spent a lot of time in the village, we know where all the black market stuff was going.
Did you try Korean food?
Yes, actually, that's another thing. Being at the end of the line, our army rations were pretty bad, actually. I mean, you know, it wasn't all the food was bad, but very often we'd go out into the field, out of the compound. It was more of a reconnoiter, you know, recon. That's where that word comes from. And we'd have C rations, and they were World War II C rations,
Yeah.
and they were pretty bad. So, so I'd go to the village to eat regularly.
Uh-huh.
We'd call them chop houses. I don't know if that translates to anything, but anyway, we go to chop house, and I have no idea what the meat was. I never asked, but we'd go to the chop house, and there'd be a round table with a hole in the middle for charcoal, and they'd bring you a plate of raw meat, and you'd sit there with chopsticks and cook your own meat and eat it.
Yeah,
Okay, you're familiar with that whole process.
absolutely.
And I'll tell you what, you know, that kind of thing. And the other thing I discovered in the village was something called ramyun.
Yeah.
Okay, now that's a big deal here. But we'd had none of that in the United States
At the time.
at the time. And I'd go to the field, and we'd get water in a steel pot,
Yep.
build a fire, and boil the water in a steel pot, and cook ramyun as an alternative to C rations.
Did you like it?
I sure did, and I was glad to see it when they make. I still eat it when I'm at home.
I brought my own ramen here.
Well, you didn't have to. They make it here.
Really?
Oh, you didn't know? You haven't been to a grocery store?
I'm from Syracuse, New York, so I brought it from Syracuse, but they sell here?
Oh, sure.
Oh,
Absolutely.
oh,
Absolutely. Both we have 2 grocery stores here, Albertsons and Walmart, and they sell it in both.
so how much were you paid at the time? As a private, I mean,
My first paycheck in the Army.
yeah, in
what-
Korea, in Korea.
Oh, in Korea? Oh, geez, E2. I don't recollect. By the time I was leaving, I was E5. I was making $350 a month,
$350 a month.
and give or take, yeah,
No other extra pay.
no.
No battle pay or
Oh, yeah, we had hazardous duty pay for everybody north of the 38th parallel. I
Yeah.
thought was getting hazardous duty pay,
Yeah.
but don't quote me on that. I do not know.
How
And that
ma-
was that
how
was
much?
$50 a month.
right? So you got $400.
Yes. Well, I was sending a lot of it home, so I wasn't seeing that kind of money. I was sending it
For what?
for my savings.
Savings, okay. $350. You were given the uniforms, right?
Yes,
And you have a place to sleep, and you were provided basic meals.
correct.
Wow, you were rich at the time.
We call it 3 hots and a cot. And
What is that?
3 hot meals and a cot. All the meals weren't hot, by the way, but that was the poetic way of phrasing.
Yeah.
Now, I have to tell you, again, being from Camp St. Barbara,
Yeah.
I had a detail where I had to go a couple of times, well, once a month, to Uijeongbu,
Yes.
to Camp Red Cloud. And I had to go to G2 headquarters, which is intelligence, and get target lists. And while I was there, that's an Air Force base too, or was back then, Camp Red Cloud. They had an Air Force mess. I walked into an Air Force mess, and I could not believe it. It was like the Air Force.
Hotel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was like a continental breakfast. I'd get there at like 7 o'clock in the morning, leave early, and drive down to. I had a Jeep and a driver and a sidearm, and before I went to pick up the information, we'd have eat, and we had ration cards, so we had to get our meals card stamped. I walked in there, and the mess orderly or whatever it was in the Air Force said, how do you want your eggs? I'd only eaten powdered eggs for like a year, and I thought he was kidding, like, well, how do you want your egg? Of course, powdered. And then he said, how many? Real eggs. But the real killer was, we got to the end of the chow line, and it was a big aluminum bowl full of fresh fruit. I hadn't seen a banana in a year, and they had bananas at Camp Red Cloud.
So all the dirty work's done by the Army and Air
There
Force.
you go. You can quote me on that. So.
So tell me about role played by the American forces in Korea, Korea defense veterans. What did they do? What is their legacy? Why was it important for American soldiers continue to serve in Korea even after the war?
Well, the joke at the time among the Americans was, we're here to keep the South Koreans going north as well as the North Koreans from coming south. So it was, I don't think all that, off the mark, really. We were more intermediaries between North and South because we had Katusas in our unit, and, well, my impression was they were the rich kids from Korea, from South Korea.
Yes. Because they should be able to speak in English. They have to take an exam.
But I had, doing what I did, I was around a lot of higher ranking officers, both American and Korean. And the Korean officers were pretty gung-ho about, reuniting the country the hard way, meaning,
Attack.
But that was 69, 70. I left Korea in July of 1970. So at that particular moment, yeah, it was, like I said, we were always on a war footing. And the North Koreans, of course, played that up. They would apparently, we'd get intelligence where they were massing on the border. So we have to judge that, they're coming south, and we got to be ready. So sometimes, 4 o'clock in the morning, pitch dark, we had a siren in our compound. Siren would go off.
Yeah.
And grab your boots, grab your gear. We didn't have rifles, well, unless you were on guard duty, but we didn't have rifles in the barrack. We had to, if you weren't on guard duty, you had to run to the armory and get your rifle and get ammo. And my squad, the battalion FDC, we had our own 60 machine gun, M60. So we'd grab the M60 and a couple cans of belted ammo and somebody would run down. We had a motor pool guy. He'd run down and get all the vehicles started and get them running. I mean, it could be, below zero when this all happened. And the North Koreans were just screwing with us, is exactly what they were doing.
Yeah.
So, and then we'd all run off and get set up somewhere in the middle of the boonies. And I recall at one particular spot, North Koreans had these heavy-duty searchlights that would go around and around. And this place we were, and I have to say, the American, whoever commander set this up was really stupid. We're in the dark, and we get set up in the dark, and somebody gets on the radio. Well, as soon as we break radio silence, the searchlight was going around and around, and it would stop. Have you heard this story before? Okay.
I just had a wild guess.
So what we did was everybody was on, we shut everything down, and bit by bit, before daylight, we all snuck out of there, except for the S2 and S3 vans, which I was in, and then we had like commo checks, radio checks every few hours, just to make the North Koreans think that the unit was still there and they had gone down the road somewhere. And guess who was on that detail?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, still, there are about 26,000 American forces in Korea right now.
really?
Yeah. So, because we had a reduction of U.S. forces from Germany, now South Korea is the second largest of U.S. forces in overseas military stationing. And President Trump is trying to reduce the level of American soldiers in South Korea, while U.S. and China is at odds against each other. They are colliding against each other. In trade, 2 U.S. aircraft carriers in South China Sea. China is challenging constantly American power. What do you think we have to do? I am an American citizen too. So what do you think that U.S. has to do with South Korea and North Korea and China?
Well, I'm going to give you my take on Trump's. Okay, he thinks of himself as a big negotiator, that he can negotiate anything. And when you're building high-rise buildings in New York City, trust me, the negotiation's almost like an international agreement between us and the Soviet Union. Russia. So Trump's attempt was, we want to get Kim to drop his nukes. However, having served in Korea and followed Korea for the last 50 years, followed the politics over there, my take is Kim's never getting rid of his nukes, because he gets rid of his nukes and the North Koreans that bow to him, they're getting rid of him.
Exactly.
He's out. Those nukes and his personal security guard are what keeps him in power. Mm-hmm. And so that was never, but it was a nice play from Trump. So this reduction, talk about reducing American forces in Korea, that was part of the negotiation. Well, if you lower the American presence in South Korea,
yeah,
then maybe we'll talk a little. But Kim's always saying, you do this and you do that, and maybe I'll do something, and then he never does anything. His father was that way, and his grandfather, Kim Il-sung, who was the head guy when I was there. What do you call him? The chairman?
No, he is the chairman of the North Korean Communist Party.
Okay. Yeah, Kim Il-sung.
Yep.
So he taught his son, and his son taught his grandson, negotiate, and then just build whatever, do whatever you want. So that's not going to fly. So as far as South Korea, the president of South Korea, whose name escapes me now,
Right now, Moon Jae-in, President Moon.
President Moon. Okay. He's making very friendly overtures toward North Korea,
Yes.
or so I've been told. I'm not sure I understand. Is that a political move on his part, or does he actually think that he can negotiate with Kim? Because that's ridiculous too.
Both.
Okay. Well, where I was, and this is another thing, going back to Camp St. Barbara. Now, I spoke very little of the language, but I could, chit-chat a little bit with some of the bilingual Katusas and Korean. A lot of the Korean rice farmers in the mountains where I was,
Yes.
okay, they have relatives that were stuck in North Korea. So there was some incentive for them to, to see their grandfather or something that got separated by the DMZ. Mm-hmm. And I presume they're pretty much all dead now. And I don't know if anybody in the South is, well, we're possibly very old,
Yeah.
that still have relatives in North Korea. I mean, close blood relations. So I'm thinking maybe that is the incentive for President Moon to negotiate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And China, looking at North Korea is like Cuba used to be for the Russians. North Korea is for the Chinese.
Yep.
Their client state. China is not going to let Kim lose power or North Korea go under. There's not going to be a revolution in North Korea because the Chinese will put it down. You almost might think of North Korea as being a province of communist China. They want that buffer there between South Korea and Japan. Now, speaking of Japan, I know the Japanese are doggone worried about North Korea too because
Yes.
they're subject to the same blackmail that you either buy our stuff or give us stuff, or we'll point our nukes in your direction. And I suppose Kim's nukes can probably hit Japan at this point. So
Of course, it's so close so that
Right.
always North Korean missile test.
they shoot them
to
over Japan.
Exactly.
I don't know if I tolerate that.
Exactly.
I'd say you do that again, and Pyongyang going to be cinder somewhere. Okay, that's how I'm in Cody, Wyoming, so I can afford to talk tough, I guess.
Absolutely. What is the legacy of the Korean defense veteran compared to Korean war veteran? What is the importance and contribution you made compared to the contribution made by the Korean war veteran? Be honest.
Not even close. The Korean War veterans, that was every bit as ugly as anything in Vietnam or in World War II. The Chinese came across the Yalu River in a horde and literally slaughtered everybody that was in their sights. I mean, it was, and we weren't set up for fighting at, well, I can tell you, we had 20 below zero at some nights where I was in South Korea. And 15 years earlier, we just didn't have the equipment to fight a war. Guns jammed, people froze to death, American GIs froze to death. I could probably compare it to the Germans fighting the Russians in Leningrad. That's how ugly it was.
Yeah. Chosen few in northeast of North Korea in 1950, around November and December, 1st Marine Division was almost like defeated, and 50 below zero at the time. So many soldiers were just frozen to death.
Right.
Yeah.
So the people that were actually there, people that were in that division fighting near Camp St. Barbara, there was some tunnel that American GIs got slaughtered in, and I can't remember the name of it, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
but it was right near where I was stationed, by the way. And there's memorials all over to units that got wiped out. Right across, in Camp St. Barbara, actually. Well, actually, outside my compound, but I guess it was part of Camp St. Barbara. There was a cross on a mountaintop. When I was there early, we climbed up, me and a buddy of mine, well, he went off somewhere, but at the time he was a friend of mine. I said, hey, let's go see where that cross is. It was where the 1st Cavalry lost their colors.
Uh-huh.
They were overrun and slaughtered in the Korean War.
Very good point. So still, but there has been an important contribution made by these American soldiers stationing in Korea after the war. Since 1953, July 27th, still now, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's very important. Now it's time for us to talk about those two.
South Korea, I know because everybody's driving Kias over here. South Korea has become a first world economy. And I suppose there's still ox carts pulling rice for the rice farmers up in the mountains somewhere where I was. But, you know, basically it's a modern country, and I can tell you, there's no doubt in my mind that if we had pulled out like in 1953, Korea would probably be one country and it'd be all communist. Well, I'm serious. Well, you're
I agree.
Korean, you tell me, am I wrong? They would have come south and probably slaughtered your parents and or put them in a re-education camp, and you and I wouldn't be sitting here.
That's the point. That's the point that we need to talk about, the contribution made by the U.S. forces in Korea. And we need to go beyond this, okay, so that we can maintain the security and peace and prosperity in the East Asian region. But there are North Korea now, they have a capabilities of ICBM. I'm not sure whether they have a real accuracy to target it, but still, as you mentioned, they can target Tokyo, Japan, easy, and China is constantly challenging the power of the United States. I mean, history changes, but it's a very heightened time, and there are U.S. forces in Korea, and that plays a lot of important role. So,
well, let me tell you something about American history. In the 1930s, prior to World War II, we had a large contingent of people in this country, that said, listen, we participated in the Great War, World War I. Europe is starting to shoot at each other again. We're staying out of it this time. Those people did not all die from old age. They passed that legacy on to their grandchildren. We have a large contingent here that, well, I don't want to get too deeply into American politics, but I call it, in the 1960s, the way that manifested itself, this notion, was the ban the bomb crowd. That if we get rid of our nukes, the Russians will get rid of their nukes, and then we'll all have peace, and then we'll all live happily in harmony. The world does not work that way. We didn't learn that lesson then, and I can see it now. The Chinese, one of our candidates for president said, the Chinese aren't a threat. Oh my God, are you kidding? I mean, if they could get away, they would get away with whatever they thought they'd get away with. And I think they thought they could get away with spreading this virus around and wrecking the rest of the world, and they'd be there to pick up the pieces. Well, the United States is a little more resilient than that, but you can see, you know the politics that are going on right now. It's like, the Chinese didn't do it to us, Trump did it. Are you kidding? Now, there's a lot I don't like about Donald Trump. Don't get me wrong, I'm not here to blow his horn. But, you know, you're right. There are threats all over the world, And at least Trump had the intestinal fortitude to kill Soleimani, the chief terrorist from Iran, okay? But, you know, they'll grow another one, and we have to be on guard.
Yep.
And we got North Korea and we got China, and it's a mess in the world, and I'm hopeful that we don't let our guard down because, like you say, if we have President Joe Biden, Kim Jong-un is going to get right back to work on that ICBM that's going to hit Washington, D.C. So
Got it.
that's, and I'm a moderate, by the way.
You are the moderate, so I can imagine what's the extreme. So let's talk about, have you been back to Korea?
No.
No. But you know about Korean economy, right?
Yes.
Do you know
Well, we see their products here. Yeah.
do you know the official rank of Korean economy in the world?
I do not. I would guess it's top 10.
11th largest
Oh, 11th.
economy in the
Okay.
world.
Well, this year will probably be top 10.
See, from ashes of Korean War, now become 11th largest economy. We don't have a drop of oil in South Korea, right? We don't have much natural resources, but it's now we are selling Samsung, Hyundai, all these things. How do you think that it happened? Why we don't teach about it? Why is it forgotten war?
Okay, now you're really going to get me into the weeds. now you've tweaked me. Okay. During the late 1960s, at the height of the Vietnam War, okay, we had a lot of war protesters. It looks the same as it does right now. Obviously, you weren't here in 1968. 1968 and 2020 looks exactly the same to me. So here's what happened. A lot of the Vietnam War protesters stayed in college to keep their 2S deferments. Some of them went to Canada to avoid the draft, okay? Some of them just stayed into college, got their bachelor's, got their master's, got their PhDs. They started making the curricula of
Anti-war.
college students for generations. The college students became teachers and went into high schools. And they're teaching kids in high school. And a lot of them, now I'm not saying Wyoming, I don't think it's happening in Wyoming, but you know what, you take California. I'm sure their teaching cadre in high school is teaching their kids that this is a racist, sexist, homophobic country that isn't worth keeping, and you better get into the streets and burn things down. And we're watching it on TV. I mean, and it's not like everybody is in the streets protesting and rioting, but you know, there's enough of a political angle. All you had to do was look at the candidate for president named Bernie Sanders. Look at his rallies. The kids sitting, it looks like a college pep rally behind him. Those are all the kids that have been indoctrinated at how terrible American is, how terrible American society is, and the economy. Capitalism is evil. Now, what built the economy of South Korea? Capitalism.
Exactly.
There you go. Now you know why it's not being taught.
International trade and
Correct.
capitalism. Okay. So
Did I bring my soapbox here? I'm sorry.
do you know that Korean government is going to run a Revisit Korea program? We used to invite the Korean War veterans. Now they're going to extend it to the Korea defense veteran. Are you willing to go?
Yeah, sure. I'm retired. I turned 72 shortly, and yeah, I'd love to go back. In fact, I know for a fact Camp St. Barbara no longer exists, but you know, I can go back there and see where I was. And
Sure. I'll put your name into the list, okay?
All right.
And Camp St. Barbara was north of Dongducheon, right? Yes.
Yes. Now, geez, you know this better than me. So, the military supply route, the MSR, like I said, And I thought of it as a straight line, but I'm not sure. But it went from Kimpo to Uijeongbu to Tongdeshan to Camp St. Paul, Pepekwe-ri.
Exactly.
It was a village on the side of a mountain,
yeah.
and that's all it was.
Yeah, yeah. So it's actually west side of the Korean Peninsula, north of Dongducheon. So it's almost like a straight line from Seoul to.
As I recollect.
Yes.
So-
Yep. You know, when did you move to Cody?
2010.
2010.
I came here to Cody hunting and fishing for 20 years before that.
Ah.
So, and the
So
early,
you know where to go to trout fishing here.
I do.
Oh my God.
Well,
I
you can go-
love fishing.
Almost anywhere, actually. It's not a mystery. I have secret spots I go to on the South Fork because there's a lot of private land there and they don't like you fishing on their river. But anyway,
So you sneak in?
well, no, there's public access, but it's somewhat difficult to ascertain where that public access. Well, no, I won't get too far in the weeds with you, but the entire North Fork, north of Gibbs Bridge, north of the reservoir now. I guess there's some private spots to that in the town of Wapiti, but once you leave Wapiti, headed for Yellowstone, that river's open all the way to Yellowstone. Mm-hmm. Well, it cuts off at Pahaskatipi, and
I was fascinated by this Bighorn National Forest and the gorges and the creeks. Amazing place. I'm in love with it.
that's all public land,
Yeah.
and it's all accessible to anybody.
Excellent.
That's right.
Excellent.
And God bless America.
Yeah. You know, I really enjoyed the conversation with you. And the Korea defense veteran is important as Korean War veterans because Korean War has never finished with the peace treaty and now resurfacing right now between North and China and US and Korea and Japan. We are all there. So I think this is very important. And our future generation need to know about what has been done by the Korean War veteran and Korea defense veteran.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And on behalf of Korean nation, even though I'm American citizen, I want to thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of choice in the matter, but but you know what?
See,
I'm proud to have served.
so you didn't know about Korea. Now you know about Korea.
I follow Korea quite
What is Korea to you personally?
well. It's a little over a year of my life. Number one, I went back to college and got a degree in economics, and the first economic lesson I learned. Well, I shouldn't say the first. Is there a word for trash in Korean? I was told there's no such thing as trash.
No.
Everything has a value.
No. There is a 쓰레기. 쓰레기 means trash. Yes.
Okay. Well, I was misinformed 51 years ago. But the first economics lesson that really sunk into me, that made me want to study the subject, there were two mama-sans, and I forget how we call mama-sans. They were arguing over a pile of ox dung in the road, on a dirt road.
Yeah.
And now ox dung in our culture not only has a negative value, we want to get rid of it.
Right.
They were fighting over it because apparently someone owned the rice paddy on each side of the road, and that was money to them. It was fertilizer.
Fertilizer.
Correct.
And it can be also used as fire when you dried it up.
Correct. Oh, that I know about. Cow chips. You can use it.
Yeah.
We use
So what is your Korea?
So when I left Korea, I got home in July of 1970. I was back at my college, Lehigh University, in September of 1970. I said, let me in now. I've seen the other side. That ain't fun. So I went right back to college and took an aptitude test, and they said, well, you have an aptitude for business. And I said, I want to major in economics. So my experience in Korea, seeing people that get something out of what we refer to in America as nothing.
Nothing.
Yes, that made me aware of. So So here I sit. Well, I'm retired now, but I was in business for 40 years.
What did you do?
I was a contractor.
For what?
Well, mostly for homeowners, although my first experience contracting was in new construction. I was what I refer to myself as an exterior building contractor.
I see.
Everything from the roof to the basement, except masonry. I did no masonry. Well, I put the mortar in chimneys because to hire a mason, they would build an elaborate scaffold to get up there because they weren't. But I was in the roofing business, so I felt comfortable.
So I have to contact you if I want to build my house here.
Well, I'm not the guy to do because I'm retired. I have a house that I had a guy from Cody build for me on the South Fork. And he said to me, well, given your background, is there anything you want to do here? And I said, yes, I want to show up every Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock with a cooler full of beer for you guys. And that's all I want to do. I'm not picking up a hammer for anything. Unless, I need to. But anyhow, that's it.
Howard, thank you so much.
Okay.